Hello, my name is Mrs Garbutt and I'm an Associate Director of English for the NET Director Team. I've been part of the Director Team for almost 2 years and I've previously had experience of working in a different successful academy trust, so I'm well aware of the vital support a family of schools provides. So here's an overview of the most common errors that we encounter in our everyday lessons. We're going to have a look at any misconceptions. We're going to see how we can empower our students so they become reflective learners and how we can ensure that these rules are having an impact. So although a number of Key Stage 3 schemes are structures around the studies of literature texts, language skills are built in throughout all content delivery. So the language is taught through literature. You can ensure this cross-fertilisation between the subject and the constant development and escalation of skills becomes holistic. And this approach to study of English needs to be seen as a whole. Alongside this, the individual lessons are provided within all Key Stage 3 schemes that address language skills as a discrete focus, both reading and writing, and the schemes delivered in Term 2B and 3B ensure that language is also recognised in an independent focus. So therefore, 2 subjects are recognised as functioning best when studied for their own individual merits, but equally balanced too. Consequently, this is a key principle that underpins the study of both English language and literature throughout the Year 7 to Year 11 curriculum. Therefore, grammatical misconceptions need to be addressed in every year so that we can provide an additional layer of intervention that builds upon a student's primary education. So our role is to ensure that we teach a student to be a confident reader and writer. However, some students and adults have problems compartmentalising certain nuances of the English language, grammar in particular. These are enough to make a piece of writing incorrect by its content and meaning. So I'm sure you've got a list of your own that you seem to revisit with certain students, and I aim to cover some of the most common and how we can remind students about these simple rules. You could even make this part of your lesson through an Aspire section on your PowerPoint. So this is a cognitive reminder to allow the students to support their long-term memory and ability to appropriately transfer that learned information to new contexts. So here, as you can see, are some of the most common grammatical errors that I encounter with Year 11 students. But if we can follow the rules and embed these into their long-term memory, we'll be supporting them through their GCSEs and beyond. I think when we look at tret versus treated, tret is a colloquial word and we often slips into speech or in the written word because students haven't been told that it doesn't exist in the context. So treated is correct. It's the past tense of treat. So Northerners, when they talk, they slip into this really easily. I think it's because treated seems to sit uncomfortably in their vocabulary. However, whether this is used in their spoken word or in their writing, we should always correct this. So it's an ideal way to embed this would be through like a quick activity, perhaps prior to a piece of descriptive writing. And again, even if you hear a student say this, I would continually remind them that tret isn't a word. So you can see from the examples on the slide in front of you. So enough, screamed the petulant teenager. I'm sick of being treated this way. So we can see immediately how this is incorrect. But then we can also see that it says, following their after school English, the Year 11 students were treated to pizza. So we can clearly see how which one is correct and which one isn't correct. And those constant reminders will support the students in their long-term memory. Okay, so in front of you, you've got a slide that I can send you this if you'd like it, and you can use these to incorporate with your sentences to ensure that they are grammatically correct and which ones are incorrect. So in the box next to the sentence, you can either add a C for correct or an I for incorrect, and you can just change your statements. It's ideal also to put it in your Aspire, so you can say in today's lesson, use the correct grammar in your descriptive writing, or it could actually be in a reading section as well. This will be peer assessed at the end of the lesson, so remember the rule that tret is not a real word. And again, then you can link it back to your the plenary. If you have that one student who is determined to prove a point, just be mindful because tret actually is in the dictionary, but it's linked to an allowance of extra weight made by a purchaser of certain goods. So it's not in the context that we want. So please just be mindful of that. And if you do have that student that does bring that up, if you can just say to them, it really isn't the context. It's more in a mathematical context at this period. So here's one which I see quite regularly with certain students. So been versus being. Now the main difference is that being is the present participle. So all present participles end in an ing, like swimming, running, learning. On the other hand, been is the past participle. So some past participles end in an ed. So like learned, studied. Others are irregular, like run and written and spoken. And this is one of them. Okay, so let's have a little look. I always like to reinforce the simple rules of being versus being so that students then go through that mental process. So has the action been completed? Is it working with that verb of to have? If yes, then they're going to use been. So is it not working with the verb to have? Is the action continuous? And if it's yes, then it's going to be being. So always reminding them of that mental process. If you just give them the answer immediately, then yes, they'll copy it down, they'll write it down, but they will lose the reason why we're using that. So again, just reminding them of that mental process. So again, here's a slide that you could possibly use, and it just has those words that are missing. So you can have a go at this yourself anyway, and you can just change the statements. So you constantly just reminding the students of the grammatical and the correct, whether or not they're using been or being. So also you can have that in your Aspire. So in today's lesson, use the correct grammar in your descriptive writing, for example. This would be peer assessed at the end of the lesson. So remember the rule that being has a completed action, whereas being is a continuous action. And if need be, just keep that on your PowerPoint throughout, and remember to link that then to your plenary at the end. So in front of you, you've got a slide that you can if you'd like any information on these or you'd like some further slides, and you can put these in your bell tasks, and then you could also use it as an Aspire on your board. So you can see where there is 10 opportunities for them to get this correct. You could also do it from maybe at the beginning of the lesson and then check their learning at the end of the lesson. Also keeping their Aspire on the board. So for example, in today's lesson, using the correct grammar in your descriptive writing, your reading, whatever. So this will be peer assessed at the end of the lesson. So remember the rules. So being it's a completed action, whereas being is a continuous action. So this is an aspect which I don't think gets enough coverage. So it's a constant annoyance as an examiner, and I think it just needs a little bit more attention. Perhaps some people don't know the rule, and I think it's really important that we start to pass this on to the students. If we're going to look at everything that's grammatically correct, for either tense, you should have either that I was sitting or I was seated. So those are the correct tenses. So whether you're talking about past or present. Now, I was sat is colloquial, but it seems to be used more frequently. So the easiest way that I found for students to do this is that you replace the sat or sitting words with regular verbs like walked or walking. So if walking fits, then you use sitting. And if walked fits, then you use sat. Okay, so think about walking with the ing, and then you use sitting, and walked, then you go to sat. So if you look at this example here, so he was just blank there minding his own business. So if I go through this process and I think, okay, so he was just walked there minding his own business. Well, that's incorrect. Grammatically, it doesn't sound right. So we know that sat is incorrect. But if we put that into the sentence, he was just sat there minding his own business, I'm sure you're already starting to picture some students who use that. So he was just walking there, minding his own business. That fits in grammatically correct. So he was just sitting there, minding his own business. So we know that sitting fits in that particular sentence. So it's a really quick and easy way of doing it. It's just that the students need to be trained to go to a different, more regular verb and then to go back to the sat or sitting. So in front of you, you can see a slide. And you can get students to do this on their whiteboards, just 1 to 10 down the side, and then they can write down the correct words. And maybe you could say to them, you've got 3 minutes to do this. It's a really quick and easy way of getting them to hold their boards up to see who's got it correct. And again, you could always put this back into the plenary at the end and see if they've got it correct, either with the same extract or with a different one as well. So it's a really quick and easy way to do that. And again, as I've said previously to other examples, if you want some a variety of those, I have got some slides that you can drop into your own lessons. Now, very similar to sat and sitting, we've also got stood versus standing. However, the same rule applies to the stood and standing. So have a go. If walking fits, use standing. If walked fits, use stood. I think you'll be quite surprised on your understanding as well, whether or not it's grammatically correct. I think it's really interesting when you start to do these really short, just little tasks for students, how they become really excited by understanding what's grammatically right, and just by following these simple rules. So how often have we heard a child say, may I lend a pen? Well, lending means that you're going to give it to somebody. So it's implying that you actually don't have the pen. And I think this is something that students don't realise. So again, going through that mental process, they'll soon realise the difference between lend versus borrow. So borrow means to take something from someone with permission and with the intention of giving it back. So it's that past tense, and that past participle is borrowed. So it's like observed, and it's like, the ed on the end. So can I borrow the car? So if you let me borrow it, I'm going to give it back to you. You can borrow a pen from me. And what happened to the books that I borrowed from the library? So we can see straight away that these are something that's going to be, it's permission and it's the intention of giving it back. So lend is just the opposite. It means to give it to somebody with the expectation that they will return it. So that past tense and past participle is the lent part of it. Yes, I'll lend you the car. You won't borrow the car. You will lend the car. So he'll be happy to lend you a pen. And the library lent me those books 3 weeks ago. So remember, to borrow means that you're asking for it, and to lend means that that person is allowing you to take it. On the slide in front of you, you have got an example that you can again drop into a starter activity, and again you can revisit it in a plenary, and just to ensure that they are picking up that mental process and they're using it in their work. Again, all you would need to do is to change those sentences, and you could perhaps give them a little bit of a task here to produce a sentence for each lend and borrow, but leave a gap so your shoulder partner has to complete the activity. So it's really giving them the opportunity to go into their long-term memory and to think deeper about what's necessary to get those sentences correct. I'm sure a lot of you on a regular basis see apostrophes used incorrectly or not at all. However, there are a variety of rules that are necessary. So apostrophes, the first rule is that does the word own anything? So it's always worth to ask the students, do the word own anything? The S and the apostrophe are connected by one thing, and that's owning another. So if words do not need an apostrophe if they don't own anything. So simple plurals definitely do not need an apostrophe. So here's an example of that. So Sue went out with her friends. So you can see here that her friends do not own anything in the sentence. So there's no apostrophe here. Here's some other examples as well that you could reinforce with your students. So I don't like Mondays. Carrots are my favourite vegetable. Those 5 dogs are driving me mad. Your toothbrushes should be renewed regularly. And I do not understand when apostrophes should be used. So Mondays, carrots, the dogs, the toothbrushes, and the apostrophes, they don't own anything. So just a reminder, you don't need an apostrophe and an S on a word that doesn't own anything, and this is a common error. The second rule is if it does have some ownership and the word does not already end in an S, you need to show the ownership when the word does not end in an S. So as I've shown you before, here's an idea of a slide that you can use. So this is an example so that students can decide whether or not it needs to have just an S or an apostrophe S. So again, you could do this on a whiteboard, but I would always get them to write the word that has the either S or the apostrophe S connected to it. So 1 to 10 just at the side of the whiteboard. So for example, Martin's records were too loud, so we know at this point it will be an apostrophe S. Sundays are my favourite days, so there's 2 in there as well. So you can start to add to those. And the final rule, so does the word already end in an S? So then you would use an S and apostrophe to show ownership when the word already ends in an S. A name ending in S follows the rule for this plural ownership too. So for example, we've got here, Mrs Jones's classroom was a delight to behold. So Mrs Jones, she owns the classroom. Charles Dickens novels, so we know that the novels belong to Charles Dickens. And we've got James's bicycle stood against the garage wall, so the bicycle belongs to James. Some people might put an apostrophe S, although it does look rather clumsy. So again, it's just that S on the end because we've already got this S at the end of the word. I feel like this is a regular slide that I go to, and it gives students that opportunity to reassess and to go through that mental process. And I would do it exactly the same way on the whiteboard. You can have 1 to 10 at the side, and you can see if they put it in the correct way. And again, you might go to the plenary at the end and to readdress this as well. You could also have it as your aspire on your board, so to check your apostrophes as you work. This will be peer assessed at the end of the lesson, so remember the rules. Exclamation marks. We can see Donald Trump, who is an advocate of the exclamation mark. The president uses this to whip up a frenzy, which inevitably results in his opinion being dissected by some form of media. Bill Bryson writes that the exclamation mark is classically used to show strong emotion, for example, get out, or the urgency of help me. If part of the point of punctuation is to change like the timbre of the voice, another part is to get you out of a hole. So that punctuation saves lives. There's a meaningful difference between, for example, duck without an exclamation mark and duck with an exclamation mark. Both of Bryson's examples are notable for the underlying sense of emergency, this need for security, and the atmosphere of fear. So no wonder newspapers have historically referred to exclamation marks as astonishers, gaspers, and screamers. No wonder tabloid newspapers are keen to apply these to their articles. Consequently, the growth in social media has diluted our use of spelling and punctuation, and the more we use, the more we need to use them. The more you need to use them, the more you'll increasingly make no sense. And you can see on the slide that it says, that's ridiculous, with a number of exclamation marks. That's ridiculous, and that's ridiculous. So remember, 1 exclamation mark will be enough. So the definitive of an exclamation mark means that the stop should be used with 1 exception, only after real exclamations. So the real exclamations that they describe are roughly what we already know, these interjections, these expletives, these commands, these pronouncements of surprise. The exceptions they refer to is rather telling for when the writer wishes to express his own amazement or other feeling about what it's not a statement, but particularly a quotation from someone else. This is, they continue, when the exclamation mark is a neat or concise sneer. So have a look at the sentences on the PowerPoint. Subjective, don't you think? So therefore it's important to teach students how they should use exclamation marks sparingly. Unfortunately, they don't have the gravitas of a colon, so let's make students aware of their relevance and how they must be used sparingly to gain the maximum effect. So I hope some of this has helped you and it will support you through your teaching. Please feel free to drop me an email if you would like some additional slides, some support, some training on how to deliver those sessions. Like I say, it's just a quick overview, but if we start looking at these misconceptions in the early years, we're going to help them in getting their GCSEs in year 11. Thank you.